Welcome back to Dark Cinema Recaps. Today we have got our original Scream 1, 2 and 3 recaps all bundled together in one video without the nonsense that we talk in between. And so it's just going to be a straight recap from beginning to end. If you want to see those individually, links will be down in the description, and this is going to nicely wrap up the original trilogy.
Yes. So next we're going to be doing Scream 4, which then will wrap up the Wes Craven films. And then after that, we're going to be doing Scream 5 and 6. The film opens with young Casey Becker receiving phone calls from an unidentified caller. At first, it seems as if he has gotten a wrong number, but it soon becomes clear he is toying with her. His voice gets more and more threatening. Casey becomes frightened when she realises her caller can see her. She begins to panic when the caller threatens to kill her and forces her to answer movie trivia in exchange for her life and the life of her boyfriend Steve, who she sees tied up on the back patio.
After killing Steve, the caller torments Casey until finally breaking into the house and chasing her. He's dressed in a black costume with a white ghost mask over his face. He chases her across the lawn as her parents pull into the driveway. They don't see her, and Casey's been stabbed in the chest, unable to scream. After killing Casey, the murderer strings up her body in the backyard for her parents to discover.
We then meet Sidney Prescott and her boyfriend Billy Loomis. Billy sneaks into her bedroom window and attempts to have sex with her, but Sidney is unsure and wants to remain a virgin for now. They are almost discovered by Sidney's father, Neil, and he comes into Sidney's room to discuss the fact that he is going out of town. We learn that Sidney's mother was killed almost 1 year before, that Sidney and her father are alone, and that Sidney's testimony identified Ray Donovan, Cotton Weary, as her killer, although Cotton swears he is innocent.
The next day, Sidney's school is abuzz with news that the murderer in classes are temporarily cancelled. Sidney decides that since her father is gone and she's alone, she's going to stay with her best friend Tatum, and that is also a bed I would like to crawl into. Sidney, Tatum and Billy sit with their group of friends, which includes Randy, who is obsessed with horror movies, and Stu, class clown type, who used to date Casey Becker, and to be fair, seems like an all-round nice guy. Sidney goes home, waiting for Tatum to pick her up.
The phone rings, and she hears a strange voice, the same one that was on the call with Casey. At first she thinks it's Randy joking around, but the caller turns abusive and brings up Sidney's mother. "Do you want to die, Sidney? Your mother sure didn't." The killer emerges from a closet in Sidney's house and a chase starts. Why did he always go up the stairs? Throughout the house, and Sidney locks herself in her bedroom and dials 911. Then Billy arrives, climbing through Sidney's window again, and a cell phone falls out of his back pocket.
Sidney realises that it may have been him phoning her, and she runs downstairs out the house only to be greeted by the police. Not just the police, Dewey with a mask holding it up to the door. She's taken to the police station along with Billy, where he is questioned at the police station. Sidney meets Dewey, Tatum's older brother and town deputy. Outside the police station, she is confronted by nosy reporter Gail Weathers, the writer of an exposé about the murder of Sidney's mother. Gail feels that Cotton Weary was wrongfully convicted, and now Gail is following up a story about the murder of Casey Becker. She feels the murders are connected. Sidney then smacks Gail so hard, she gets married to Chandler.
Tatum takes Sidney to her house, where she receives another phone call from the killer, who tells her, "You got the wrong guy, Sidney, again." The next day at school, Sidney is threatened by the killer while she is in the bathroom, but she escapes. School is over and a curfew is now in place, so the group of friends decide to throw a party. Of course you do. Gail Weathers takes a cameraman to the party in an attempt to talk to Sidney, but Dewey intercepts her. The two of them talk and seem to have a mutual affection for each other.
It's actually quite nice because them two did legit get married after this film, so... They enter the party and Dewey chooses not to bust the partygoers for underage drinking. During the party, Billy and Sidney go upstairs and Sidney has hi with him. Meanwhile, Tatum has a confrontation with Ghostface in the garage. Tatum tries to escape through a cat flap, where she is killed by the world's strongest garage door. Now, as much as we joke about this scene, because we do,
Yeah.
it's iconic.
It is
The whole,
the stupidest kills I've ever seen in a horror
where she's like,
film.
like cuddling into Ghostface. Oh, please, Mr. Killer, don't kill me. And then it's just an all-out brawl where she's throwing bottles at him. She twats him with the freezer door.
And she tries to go through a cat flap.
But thing is, the stupid thing about it, the tits get through.
Yeah.
She could have actually got through. It could have worked. It was just a case of like, no, I'm getting lifted up now. Well, fuck it. I've always wanted to be in a claw machine.
Yeah. Hope for the best.
So, yeah, as much as I do genuinely love that scene.
After the interlude between Sidney and Billy, the door opens and in walks the killer, who stabs Billy in the back. Another chase ensues. Dewey is stabbed. Gail, in her news van, swerves to avoid hitting Sidney and runs her car down a hill, striking a tree and appearing to be killed. Sidney ends up in the house facing Randy and Stu, both claiming the other is the killer. Stu is vying to come inside and obtain the gun. Randy wants to leave.
Eventually, Billy stumbles down the stairs, bloodied, and lets Randy and Stu into the house, shooting Randy and turning to reveal that the blood is fake. Billy was only pretending to be stabbed. He was hated by his accomplice, Stu. Both of them are the killers. Billy also reveals that he was responsible for the killing of Sidney's mother, who had an affair with his father.
Billy blamed Mrs. Prescott for the breakup of his parents' marriage and murdered Mrs. Prescott out of revenge. Billy and Stu also reveal that they all have kidnapped Mr. Prescott, who is tied up in a closet. They have framed Mr. Prescott for the murders and intend to wound each other to make it look like as if Mr. Prescott attacked them, at which point they will both kill him and Sidney. Billy and Stu inflict flesh wounds on each other with a knife, but they are interrupted by Gail Weathers, who returns armed with Dewey's gun.
Now, this part of the film for me
I'm
is... it's perfect. Matthew Lillard just going fucking insane in this. But it's kind of like the moment...
It's that build up to it, and it's like, oh!
It's where they discuss... Because you can tell that they're in love and they don't want to admit it as well.
It's that love relationship between the two of them that is just not fully both-sided.
As Scream is a horror, there's meant to be a parody of horrors, and then becomes one of the greatest horror films of all time. And I think it lives and dies on that scene.
Yes.
If that scene isn't as good as what it is, Matthew
Lillard made that
We're
scene.
not talking about Scream today if that scene is not as good as what it is. It's incredible. Gail, the silly sausage, forgets to switch off the gun's safety and a struggle ensues. Sidney strikes back at her tormentors. Fun fact on this one, with the umbrella scene where she rams it into the chest, there was a chest plate on, and Neve Campbell legit missed. And when Skeet goes down, it's like shouting in pink. That's genuine. That's 100% happening. Killing Stu with a television and shooting Billy in the head with a gun. Dewey is revealed to be alive, as is Randy. All ends well as Gail reports that the Mocker House has been the scene of what seemed to be a real-life scary movie. Sidney and Randy are now attending Windsor College less than a year after the Woodsboro murders took place. They see news reports that a couple was murdered in a movie theatre at a preview of the Stab movie, which was based on the book by Gail Weathers about the Woodsboro murders. Phil Stevens is stabbed through the head through the wall of a bathroom cubicle. The killer then enters the cinema and sits next to Maureen Evans, and she assumes the killer is simply her boyfriend wearing a mask.
During the Casey Becker kill scene in the film Stab, the crowd goes wild. Taking advantage of this, the killer stabs Maureen multiple times. Seriously wounded and dying, she climbs up the stairs in front of the movie screen and lets out one final cry.
That's like a banshee cry as well, my god.
As the crowd realises she isn't faking, she falls down dead. Soon Sidney and Randy realise the nightmare is still all starting over again. Gail arrives to seek fame again, which she already has in abundance because of the events of Woodsboro, and because she is also worried about the second killing spree.
Dewey also arrives on the campus to try and help protect Sidney. Once again, in the rules scene, Randy and Dewey discuss the fact that anyone could be the killer. During the course of this discussion, Randy continues the job of explaining the rules of a horror movie.
There are rules!
And this time, rules of a sequel. Cece Cooper, a sorority girl and vampire slayer, is the next victim.
While alone at her sorority house, Cece is threatened by the killer over the phone, before the killer attacks her inside the house. Cece runs upstairs where she throws a potted plant and a bike at the killer, who puts a bike on the stairs.
That is a crazy moment.
Cece is chased to the top floor, where the killer throws her through the balcony doors. He then stabs her in the back twice, before throwing her over the third-storey balcony to her death.
This is where the film goes downhill for me. I mean, killing Buffy? Like, come on!
It's that chase. It's always a chase scene up the stairs, though.
Like, Sarah Michelle Gellar had a wild year as well, because she was in I Know What You Did Last Summer as well. Buffy was starting.
She was in so many different things.
And then she gets killed by the second worst Ghostfaces, man.
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose 2 out of 3 ain't bad. After the police discover the body, the students at the nearby Martini Mixer go over to investigate, leaving Sidney and her boyfriend Derek at the Delta Lambda Zeta house. Try say that 10 times. The killer attacks Sidney, but Derek appears and helps Sidney escape before he charges into the house himself. He's slashed on the arm, but the wound is not serious. In the confusion, the killer escapes, and also made himself look very guilty.
At the police headquarters, Gail and Dewey notice that the names of the new victims loosely match the 3 first victims from Woodsboro. Maureen Evans matches Maureen Prescott. Casey Cece Cooper matches Casey Becker. And Phil Stevens matches Stephen Oath. The police chief assigns 2 detectives to protect Sidney from any further attempts on her life. Later, Sidney is in the school theatre rehearsing for the play Cassandra, when the killer attacks through the mass chaos in one of the scenes. Although it is not clear if this is simply a figment of Sidney's imagination or not.
Randy is the next victim. The group's outside on the campus lawn amongst a dozen of college students enjoying the fine weather. The killer telephones and taunts them, claiming he can see them from where he is. Gail and Dewey search the dozen or so students in the area with mobile phones, trying to quickly reveal if any of them is the killer. Randy is also looking around whilst talking to the killer on the phone. He's trying to stall the killer in order to help Gail and Dewey find him. While he's outside cameraman Joel's van, Randy is unexpectedly pulled into the van and stabbed to death, before his body is soon discovered by Joel, Gail and Dewey.
Officer Andrews and Officer Richards, the detectives who were assigned to protect Sidney, are attacked while their vehicle is stopped at traffic lights. The shittest detectives ever. One of the detectives tries to shoot the killer while on the hood of the car. The killer deliberately crashes the car, killing the detectives and knocking the killer unconscious. Gail and Dewey become involved with the killer, resulting in Dewey being stabbed and seriously wounded. Sidney and Hallie, Sidney's roommates, narrowly escape the wreckage of the car crash by squeezing past the unconscious killer in the front seat. Once out of the car, Sidney debates whether to remove the killer's mask or not, and decides to, but when she returns to find the killer is gone. She then turns around only to see Hallie being stabbed by the killer.
Sidney runs to the school theatre, where she is confronted by the killer once more. The killer reveals himself to be Mickey. You know, Mickey, who we haven't seen from like half the film, barely mentioned this whole time. The last time we saw him, he was doing a dance in the canteen. Yeah. That Mickey. Her new boyfriend's best friend. Sidney finds her boyfriend Derek tied up to a stage prop, and Mickey then shoots Derek in the chest. Mickey is also revealed to have had a partner. Sidney turns around to see Gail coming out of the stage door, leading her to believe that Gail is the other killer. Gail and Mickey shake their heads as a nope, and Debbie Salt comes out holding the other cop's gun. Sidney recognizes her as Mrs. Loomis, the mother of Sidney's previous boyfriend, Billy. Weak ass reveal. Like, yeah. I'm digging the Pamela Voorhees vibe that we've kind of got going, but
it didn't really make a lot of sense, because
The ending to Scream 2 is so bad.
Mickey reveals that it was his plan all along to be caught for the murders, and to become infamous and immortalised by the media. He wanted to blame the violent killings on horror movies and the effect of cinema violence in society.
He met Mrs. Loomis on a Psycho website and she agreed to fund his college tuition in return for his part in the killings. She also helped Mickey place calls to the victims. Mrs. Loomis' motive for killing Sidney and her friends was revenge for Sidney having killed her son. However, Sidney points out to her that if she had not abandoned Billy prior to this, then Billy and Stu Macher wouldn't have started the killing spree in the first place, which is obviously the events from the first film.
Mrs. Loomis shoots Mickey, removing him as a potential threat, and stating that it was intended legal defence was absurd anyway, and that no one would have believed it. Mickey is shot, he reflexively shoots Gail, causing her to fall off stage.
Sidney's cornered by Mrs. Loomis and tricks her momentarily into believing that Mickey is still alive, and when Mrs. Loomis is distracted, Sidney hits her in the face with a prop jar. Sidney fights back and barricades herself backstage, where she presses various stage buttons, ultimately causing the front of the stage to collapse on Mrs. Loomis. It's barely light rocks. This ending scene is just, oh my god, so bad. Mrs. Loomis survives because she got attacked by pillows. It gets Sidney in an arm lock. However, Cotton, the man Sidney initially blamed for killing his mother, arrives and takes Mickey's gun.
Mrs. Loomis tries to convince Cotton to kill Sidney, but Cotton chooses to shoot Mrs. Loomis instead, revealing he never intended to hurt Sidney. Sidney and Cotton discover that Gail is wounded but alive, and they help her. Mickey suddenly jumps up dramatically and Gail and Sidney shoot him multiple times. Then Sidney turns around and decides to shoot Mrs. Loomis in the head, just in case. It is then revealed that despite his ordeal, Dewey survived his stabbing. He is wheeled out on a gurney and taken away in an ambulance. Gail decides to ride with him in the ambulance to the hospital. It turns out that Dewey's scar tissue from the previous stabbing in his back prevented the latest stabbing from being fatal.
Sidney and Cotton walk out from the school and the media jump Sidney, questioning her about her ordeal, wanting a scoop of news. But Sidney turns her attention to Cotton, saying that he's the one that they should be talking to. She then walks across the college campus.
Cotton Weary, now the host of a successful talk show, is contacted by Ghostface, who demands to know the whereabouts of Sidney Prescott. When Cotton refuses to cooperate, Ghostface breaks into his home and attacks his girlfriend, Christine.
The voice changer thing is dumb, I hate it. I take back everything I said. The voice changer thing is so shit.
It's just... Oh,
I hate it so much.
Off the rails so quickly.
All of my being, he just does the voice perfectly.
Cotton rushes home, only for Ghostface to kill Christine, then Cotton.
Detective Mark Kincaid contacts Gail Weathers to discuss the recent murders, prompting her to travel to Hollywood. There, she finds Dewey working as an advisor on the set of Stab 3, the third film in the series based on the Ghostface murders. Ghostface kills Stab 3 actress Sarah Darling, causing production of the film to be halted.
The remaining cast, along with Dewey, Gail, gather at the home of Jennifer Joel, the actress playing Gail in Stab 3. Ghostface murders her bodyguard. He then uses a gas leak to cause an explosion, which kills actor Tom Prince.
Oh, this is like... It's just the whole thing. They're having the party, and well, not really the party,
yeah.
And then
the meeting, everybody's there.
You know that Ghostface is around, and then the fax machine starts going crazy. They get killed by a fax, and the gas was left on. He had to find a lighter, and oh god, it was. I don't take back everything I said just yet. I do genuinely love this film. It just does not start very well. Sidney's living in seclusion as a crisis counsellor for an abused women's hotline. Try saying that 10 times. Fearing another killer may strike, having uncovered Sidney's location, the killer begins taunting her by phone using the fucking voice changer to sound exactly like her deceased mother, Maureen Prescott, forcing Sidney out of hiding and drawing her to Hollywood. Martha meets the sister of Sidney's murdered friend, Randy, who as well. They were originally going to have it that he survived the attack in Scream 2, which just he got deaded.
Yeah,
and this is a perfect cameo as well. Visits Sidney and the others to deliver a videotape that Randy made before his death, warning them that the rules of a horror film do not apply to anyone in the third and final film of a trilogy, and that any of them, including Sidney, could die. Now, he also said that at this point the killer's got superhuman powers, so take everything he says with a big old pinch of salt.
Sydney is later attacked by Ghostface at a movie set, forcing the police to hold her at the station. Dewey, Gail, Jennifer and the remaining cast, Angelina and Tyson, attend a birthday party for Stab 3's directors, Roman Bridger. After Gail discovers Roman's body in the basement, Ghostface attacks the group, killing Angelina. Then Tyson, with the best kill of the movie.
He snaps his freaking neck! The rug! That stage is perfect! I love it so much! I mean, he doesn't actually die exactly at that point, but that stage 4 where he just kind of does a backflip straight onto his head, onto the floor, just, it's insane.
It is such a good one. Then Jennifer.
The killer then orders Sidney to the mansion to save Gail and Dewey, by help of the fucking voice changer. When Sidney arrives, Ghostface lures her inside to where Gail and Dewey are bound and gagged. As Sidney's freeing them, Ghostface appears, though Sidney gains the upper hand using a hidden gun to fight him off. Kincaid shows up, but is knocked unconscious by Ghostface.
Sidney flees and hides in a secret screening room, where she is discovered by Ghostface, who reveals himself to be Roman, who having survived being shot by wearing a bulletproof vest. Roman admits to being Sidney's half-brother, born to their mother, Maureen, when she was an actress in Hollywood. Years prior, he tried reuniting with her, only for her to reject him due to him being a product of rape.
Bitter over the rejection, Roman began stalking her, filming all the men she philandered with and showing to Billy Loomis the footage of Billy's father with Maureen, which motivated Billy and Stu Macker to kill her, thus setting off a string of murders in Sidney's hometown and at her college. I'm a director. When he discovers how much fame Sidney had attracted due to those events, Roman snapped and lured Sidney out of hiding, planning to kill her and frame her for the murders. After Roman kills Stab producer John Milton, whom he accuses of being his biological father and one of their mother's rapists. Now, Roman is a wet wipe. Throughout the whole film, absolute fucking wet wipe.
Yeah.
But the monologue at the end is on point. Yeah. It's genuinely just
one of the killer's,
fantastic.
Reasonings, it was a very, very good one. It just was...
It was just really, really well done, and I kind of thought, like you say, you look at Roman throughout this whole thing, like, he ain't shit, he is nothing. And then he drops like one of the best horror monologues of all time, and then Sidney just shuts it the fuck down. It's fantastic. Like, yeah, exactly. After all that, she's laughing at him, man.
Sidney denounces him and his motives, provoking an enraged Roman to engage Sidney in a fight, which ends with Roman shooting Sidney in the chest. However, Sidney survives the shot and stabs Roman multiple times, revealing him that she too was wearing a bulletproof vest.
They love bulletproof vests in
Definitely.
Scream 3. They've got loads of them. They feed the children on bulletproof vests. They're everywhere.
As Dewey and Gail arrive, a screaming Roman suddenly resurfaces with a knife. Sidney yells at Dewey to shoot Roman in the head, which Dewey does, finally killing him.
Now, the perfect part about that is he shoots him about 16 times in the chest. Sidney is screaming at him. Shoot him in the head! Shoot him in the... This is what I mean. I fucking love this film. Later at Sidney's house, Dewey proposes to Gail, who accepts. Sidney returns from a walk and leaves her gates, which were previously shown to be alarmed, open. She enters her home and is invited to join Dewey, Gail, and Kincaid to watch a movie as she goes to join the others. Her front door blows open behind her, but she walks away, leaving it as it is.